The air is thick, hot, heavy with humidity and chaos. In Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, the senses awaken as if entering a parallel dimension, one where everything smells like sweat, curry, diesel, and intense life. In its dirty, noisy streets, where thousands of people push, sell, shout, and survive, secrets also hide, secrets the rest of the world prefers not to see. But what is truly disconcerting is not the poverty or the disorder, it's the hidden beauty that blooms in the mud. Yes, Bangladesh is poor, it is chaotic, it's shrouded in a grey veil of pollution, floods, and urban misery. But it is also a place where women carry an ancestral burden and yet manage to shine in ways both intriguing and incomprehensible. Because behind those eyes outlined with kohl, behind those vibrant saris fluttering through the dust, there is a quiet fire. A repressed sensuality that always simmers beneath the surface. Women in Bangladesh live trapped in a culture where religious and social norms are strict, where showing an ankle can be considered a bold act, where virginity still weighs like a chain, and yet even under that oppression, they find subtle, powerful ways to suggest, to provoke, to choose without being seen. In a world where men make the rules, they are the ones who silently break them. It starts from a young age. In the most modest schools, many girls are already aware of their power. They know that a look can make a boy tremble, that walking with a little more confidence, ankles exposed and the fabric of the dupatta dancing in the wind, can spark whispers among boys loitering on the corners. But it's not just flirtation, it's strategy. In a country where marriage remains salvation for many, every gesture matters. Every move can be the difference between a miserable life or one with a hint of escape. By the age of 16, many are already engaged. By 17, some are already mothers. But that doesn't mean they've been defeated. Bengali women for generations have learned to resist beneath the veil, to rule from the shadows, to master the art of double meaning, of the whisper of suggestion. They are the ones who decide whether to accept the fruit at the market with their hand or with their eyes. And that minimal gesture, for those who know how to observe, can be either an invitation or a firm rejection. In Dhaka's oldest markets, there are stalls run exclusively by women. They may appear to be simple vendors of spices or fabrics, but in reality, they are nodes of feminine power. There, rumors are exchanged, alliances are formed, and strategies of seduction are woven. Because even though many are married, that doesn't mean their desires are extinguished. In fact, there is a phenomenon as hidden as it is real, the invisible lovers. In Bangladesh, female infidelity is an absolute taboo, a moral offense, even a legal one. But it exists. It simply hides in visits to relatives, evening walks to the water well, or religious gatherings that end in forbidden meetings. And although they risk everything, from social disgrace to violence, some still take the chance. Because there is something stronger than fear, the need to feel alive. And that's where a key character enters this story, the tourist, not the typical backpacker seeking paradise beaches, but the daring adventurer, the curious one who dares to step into one of the least visited countries in the world. And there, unknowingly, he becomes a kind of urban legend, because in the most conservative neighborhoods, foreign men are viewed with suspicion. But among women, they awaken a fascination that's almost clandestine. White, tall, different. They bring not only another language and another scent, but the promise of a different life, a freer, more intense one. And although many women may never dare speak to them, those who do never forget it. There are stories of young women secretly learning English just to chat with foreigners. Others, working in second-rate hotels, apply makeup carefully before the night shift, hoping some lonely guest might offer a conversation, a smile, an escape. And there's more, in cities like Chittagong or Sylhet, where NGO workers or international staff move about. Clandestine encounters between them and local women are more common than people believe. And although many of these end as nothing more than bedroom anecdotes, others evolve into marriages, relocations, even emotional exiles. But even beyond those margins of cross-border desire, the women of Bangladesh remain figures of strength and sensuality, whether permitted or not. During religious festivals, for example, many use the chaos as an excuse to unleash their bodies. They dance with energy, laugh, sweat, brush up against others. Under the guise of spiritual fervor, they open channels of physical and emotional release. And in those collective spaces, where drumbeats are deafening and sparklers paint the sky, desire disguises itself as faith. But it burns just the same. There are also rural areas where, despite restrictions, tradition preserves peculiar practices. In some southern Bengali tribes, like the Marma, courtship still includes shared river bathing rituals under certain full moons. There, the youth watch one another brush against each other, choose one another, and the women, covered only by a thin cloth and their wet hair falling down their backs, show with gestures whether they accept a suitor or not. They say nothing, they only smile or walk away. What's most intriguing about life in Bangladesh is not the poverty, nor the mud, nor the misery. What is truly striking is how, in the midst of all that darkness, women shine with a light that comes not from luxury or makeup, but from something far more primal, the determination to live, to desire, to resist, in their own way, at their own pace, by their own code. And maybe that's what fascinates the foreigner most, discovering that even in a country as forgotten and filthy as Bangladesh, there exists a form of sensuality that cannot be described, only experienced. In Bangladesh, women are everywhere, and yet invisible. They walk the streets carrying their children, dragging sacks of rice, or working 12-hour shifts in textile factories that barely pay a few dollars a month. But they're not seen for what they truly are. Engines of the country, figures who endure, who support entire families, who remain silent as the world pushes them into the darkest corner of society. And yet, if you learn to look beyond the noise, you'll find in them a brutal magnetism, a kind of sensuality that doesn't need cleavage or heels because it manifests in the steady gaze, in the fingers kneading dough, in the sweat and dust-covered skin that paradoxically seems to shine more than gold. To understand the Bengali woman, you have to observe her when she doesn't know she's being watched. When she crouches to wash clothes in the river, sari clinging to her body, the fabric betraying every curve, or when she sits at her doorstep at sunset, wet hair falling over her shoulders, bare feet sunk into the earth. There she is, unfiltered, unadorned, pure, human, and at the same time infinitely sensual. What's most curious is that this sensuality exists despite a system trying to crush it from birth. In Bangladesh, religion and tradition impose strict rules on female behavior. They cannot go out alone at night. They cannot speak with men without being judged. They must not dress provocatively, but the forbidden, as always, feeds fantasy, and that contained desire, that fire with no outlet, turns the body into a field of invisible tensions, and each woman into a story waiting to be discovered. One of the most striking places where this tension is palpable is Kamalapur, a neighborhood in Dhaka that hosts the central train station. Thousands of people pass through every day, and among that crowd stories hide, intense, secret stories. In the nearby alleyways, very young girls, some barely of age, offer their company to foreigners in exchange for food, money, or simply a chance to escape. But they don't shout or flaunt themselves. They do it with a direct look, with a phrase that doesn't sound like an offer, with a slow walk past a lost tourist. Here, desire is not sold. It is suggested. And that suggestion can be more powerful than any spectacle. The same happens in Old Dhaka, the ancient part of the city. Narrow streets, centuries-old mosques, colonial balconies full of sun-dried laundry. There, amid the bustle and decay, some young women use windows as stages. They lean out, pretend to sweep, observe the outsider with a mix of shame and daring. They say nothing, but say everything with their eyes. It's a game with no rules, an art learned from childhood. How to capture attention without appearing indecent, how to provoke without disobeying, how to keep the flame alive in a culture that forbids fire. In rural zones, where rules are even stricter, this type of game becomes more subtle. In some northern villages, for example, there are harvest festivals where young women cover their heads with veils but wear bright red lipstick. On the surface, they're respecting tradition, but in practice, they're sending a clear message. Every color, every flower in their hair, every bracelet jingling as they walk is a way of saying, "I'm here, look at me." Courtship in Bangladesh is not shouted, it is choreographed. Life in the slums, especially in industrial areas like Sava, also reveals another layer of this phenomenon. There, thousands of women work under extreme conditions, many of them barely teenagers. But when night falls, they shed their skin. Some put on makeup, others wear shiny bangles. They laugh together while walking to the bus stop. It's as if, during those few hours of darkness, they allow themselves to be something more than cogs in a machine of exploitation. As if, for a moment, they could feel desired, visible, human. Then come the arranged marriages, a cultural pillar in Bangladesh. While many women resign themselves to this fate, others find ways to bend it to their favor. In practice, many modern girls use social media to research future husbands or even redirect family decisions with the help of supportive aunts or open-minded brothers. What's fascinating is that often the seemingly submissive woman turns out to be the one pulling the strings of the marriage. She chooses when to speak, when to yield, and when to resist. A recent silent phenomenon is that of secret digital romances. Despite the restrictions, many young women use messaging apps under fake profiles to chat with foreigners. Some are sought out of curiosity, others for fantasy. But the truth is, these women are not victims. More often than not, they are the ones who control the conversation, who seduce with carefully written texts, with dimly lit selfies, with emojis loaded with intention. Some even maintain multiple virtual romances at once, without anyone around them suspecting a thing. On the opposite end, there are older women who, after decades of obedience, decide to break free. In their 40s or 50s, with grown children, some rediscover their bodies, their desires, their power. They begin to wear tighter clothes, return to the market more frequently, smile too much, according to the neighbors. They don't need lovers, they just need to feel alive. And if one happens to appear, they're not afraid. Bangladesh is a country of extreme contrasts, of crushing poverty and burning sensuality beneath the surface. Bengali women are not easy to read nor to understand, because they've learned to survive in a world that denies them, while secretly they rule it, and that double life turns them into fascinating creatures, dangerous to those who only see the surface. Amid the mud, the heat, the religion, and the control, they bloom, silent, covered, but never entirely invisible. Because their energy can be felt even without touching them, and whoever dares to look beyond the veil never forgets them. At first glance, Bangladesh seems to be sinking in endless decay. Floods strike every year. The murky waters of the Ganges carry away more than just soil. They take hopes, houses, sometimes even bodies. In Dhaka, the capital, the streets turn into rivers of trash whenever the rains pour down. And yet there is life. Not just that, there is beauty, a raw, dirty, intense beauty. A beauty that clings to the most unexpected corners as if the earth itself refused to surrender. One of the most striking phenomena in the country is that of the floating villages, entire communities living on barges, improvised platforms and rooftops held up by rusted barrels. There are no streets there, only canals, no foundations, only ropes. And yet, there is order, there is rhythm. And, as always in Bangladesh, there are women who row with strength to take their children to school, who cook over open flames on swaying rafts, who bathe in the same river where they wash clothes, hiding their bodies under wet fabrics that instead of covering suggest every curve. These women have nothing. And yet, when they walk or sail through those corridors of rotten water, they do so with their heads held high. They wear beaded necklaces, fake golden earrings that shine under the sun, flowers in their hair that perfume the air with an almost miraculous fragrance. It's not vanity, it's aesthetic resistance, a rebellious act against misery. As if they were saying, yes, I live on garbage, but I am still a woman. And that, in Bangladesh, is a form of power. But desire in this country is not only hidden in the alleys of Dhaka or in the whirlpools of the river. It also lives in the oldest traditions, those still practiced in the most remote corners of the country, like the lands of the Khulna district, near the Sundarbans mangroves. There, popular beliefs are marked by a strong syncretism between Islam, Hinduism, and local tribal cults. One of the most unsettling practices occurs during fertility rituals held in certain rural villages, where couples go to improvised temples to ask for children. The most curious thing about these rituals is that, according to tradition, if a woman has gone too long without conceiving, the problem is not necessarily medical, but spiritual. And that's where the figure of the saint or healer comes in, men supposedly blessed by the divine who claim the power to open the womb of a woman through prayers, physical contact, and ritual baths. Although the official version of these rituals is purely spiritual, it has often been documented how these men abuse their power to obtain intimate favors from desperate women. And the most disturbing part is that, in some cases, families themselves accept these conditions, believing it is a sacrifice for the sake of offspring. In this context, the Bengali woman becomes currency, body, symbol, but also, as is common in this contradictory country, a subject of resistance. Many submit out of obligation, yes, But others are beginning to organize. In towns like Jessore, secret women's circles have emerged where stories are shared, superstitions dismantled, and collective decisions are made to protect younger girls from falling into the traps of these ritual abuses. They are silent networks, patiently woven, slowly changing the landscape without the men even noticing. Even more surprising are the erotic folk legends that survive in the country's oral tradition, despite its strict religiosity. In ancient villages, people still tell the story of Bibi Sumaya, a mythical woman who seduced strangers with her voice and made them get lost among the rice fields, never to return. Other tales speak of the Red Widows, women who, after losing their husbands, become nocturnal spirits capable of possessing men in their sleep, driving them mad with desire. Although these legends may seem like mere folklore, their persistence reveals something deeper. The figure of the woman as a vessel of desire, a mysterious force, even a threat. In a country that insists on reducing women to the role of obedient wives or mothers, the collective imagination still paints them as beings with power over the invisible and the forbidden. The taboo around female sexuality in Bangladesh is so profound that even within marriage, pleasure is rarely spoken of. And yet, women are not strangers to their own bodies. Many discover their sensuality alone in silence, or in the complicity of other women. In the textile factories where thousands of young women work, there are fleeting moments of contact, laughter, secrets whispered softly. Some experience their erotic awakening far from male eyes, in the shadows, in public bathrooms, in dimly lit corridors, and they live it as a delicious crime. Another little-known phenomenon occurs in the border areas with India and Myanmar, where migration, trade, and extreme poverty create an explosive mix. In places like Teknaf or Banapali, some women actively participate in informal trade and smuggling networks, using their personal charm as a negotiating tool. The barter isn't always for goods. Sometimes it's for company, for promises, for a night or something more. But unlike the constant victimization with which they are often portrayed, many of them know they are powerful, because they control what they offer and to whom. There are also clandestine actresses. In Bangladesh, the commercial film industry, known as Dallywood, has been criticized for decades for its conservative content. But in parallel, there exists a network of independent short films distributed through private circles. Many of these works, though rudimentary, contain bold scenes performed by local women who do so in secret under pseudonyms, often without their family's permission. Some see it as an economic escape, others as a cry for freedom. The truth is that their bodies, on screen, defy the norms of a culture that doesn't want them free, but also cannot ignore them. From the outside, Bangladesh may seem simply a dirty and impoverished country, but from within it is an emotional, spiritual, and erotic pressure cooker, a place where women not only survive but reinvent themselves in every corner. From those who smile on a rusted boat to those who dominate an informal trade network, they all have something in common: a spark, a quiet fire burning between filth, tradition, and desire. And it is there, precisely, where the true dark secret of Bangladesh lies, not in its poverty nor in its chaos, but in the intensity with which its women live, even when no one is watching. The sun slowly sets over Dhaka, dyeing the rusted rooftops orange and bathing the murky canals in fire. The city remains noisy, but something has changed. Where there was once only feminine silence, now a new voice is heard, albeit timid. Bangladesh is changing, and so are its women. They are not shouting or protesting en masse, but they are acting. From the most impoverished corner to the most modern spheres of the capital, the transformation is undeniable. And amid that whirlwind of contradictions, a new form of desire emerges. One that is not afraid to be seen. The revolution is discreet, but it can be felt in the details. In the suburbs, where teenage girls no longer dream of being just wives, but influencers too. In the universities, where makeup and mobile phones become weapons of self-affirmation. And in the clandestine cafes of Gulshan, where young women sit at mixed tables, talk, laugh, and flirt. What was once unthinkable is now commonplace, though still not entirely accepted. In the coastal city of Cox's Bazar, famous for having one of the longest beaches in the world, tourism has opened unexpected doors. Local women who once couldn't show an ankle now work as guides, vendors, or receptionists, welcoming tourists from around the globe. Some have begun to explore new ways of relating, even of falling in love. and many do it out of curiosity, but also from authentic desire. For them, the foreigner represents a window into a broader world, where the female body is not hidden, but celebrated, where freedom is not begged for, but taken. However, this process is not free from danger. Women who dare to break traditional molds are targeted, attacked, and in many cases expelled from their communities. To be free in Bangladesh is still an act of courage, but that does not stop those who have tasted the flavor of their own decision. Like Rima, a young woman from Barisal, who after years of working in a textile factory decided to become a tattoo artist. She now receives clients discreetly in a dimly lit room where she tattoos names, symbols, and phrases on parts of the body shown only in confidence. She does not just draw on skin. She marks an era. Globalization, with all its lights and shadows, has also brought a flood of digital content that is reshaping the female imagination. Through series, music, and social media, Bengali women have discovered there are other ways to live, to love, to express themselves. Not all accept it right away, but many are beginning to question whether they were truly born just to serve others. And in that question lies the first step toward transformation. Curiously, even in modernity, women remain the main guardians of desire. But now they manage it on their own terms. No longer through silence, but through controlled suggestion, through choice. Some use TikTok as a space for visual liberation. They dance, pose, smile. Others maintain private chats with men who make them feel desired, even if they'll never meet. The end isn't what matters, it's the journey. The feeling of being seen, chosen, celebrated, even if just for an instant. There are also those who choose to travel. Many middle-class Bengali women dream of emigrating, studying abroad, building a life where their clothes, voices, and bodies are not under constant scrutiny. Some succeed. They go to Malaysia, to Dubai, to Europe. But even in exile, they carry with them an ancestral code of subtle seduction that fascinates and disorients. Because even if the language, the climate, or the culture changes, something in the way they look remains Bangladesh. And perhaps that is the country's greatest dark secret, that amid filth, religious control, patriarchy, and extreme poverty, there exists an unbreakable desire to live, to love, to feel, and above all to choose. Because even if the country remains in ruins, even if the rivers stay polluted, even if the streets are full of misery, Bengali women have not given up. On the contrary, they are learning to use their bodies, their stories, and their voices as tools of change, some from silence, others from provocation, but all from the certainty that they deserve more, and that more is not always money. Sometimes it is simply respect, desire, or just the freedom to walk without fear through the streets of their own city. Now, as a curiosity, in the region of Rajshahi in northern Bangladesh, there exists a fascinating tradition passed down from generation to generation among local women. The art of weaving saris with red silk threads that, according to popular belief, intensify marital passion. This practice, known as lal shuti or red thread, dates back to the 18th century, when Bengali women discovered that certain natural dyes extracted from the palash flower not only produced a vibrant red, but also released a subtle, intoxicating fragrance. Wives who mastered this technique guarded their secret formulas carefully, passing them only to their closest daughters-in-law. What's curious is that these women developed a secret code embroidered into the saris, specific patterns that communicated intimate messages to their husbands. A design of interwoven mango leaves meant, "I want to see you tonight," while spiraling lotus flowers indicated, "I'm thinking of you." Men in the region learned to read these textile messages, turning each sari into a silent love letter. During the British colonial period, authorities tried to ban this practice for being too provocative, but the women continued in secret, meeting in clandestine groups to keep the tradition alive. They even developed techniques to hide the more daring embroidery beneath layers of regular thread visible only under certain light. Today, although the tradition has evolved, many women in Rajshahi still believe that wearing a red sari woven with their own hands gives them a special confidence. Brides in the region are often gifted a lal shuti sari, embroidered by the older women of the family, thus perpetuating a tradition that uniquely blends art, sensuality, and intimate communication. This practice represents how feminine creativity can flourish even within traditional social structures, creating unique spaces for expression and power. In Bangladesh, beauty is not perfect, it's not neat, it's not easy, but it's alive. It crawls through the garbage, blooms in the mud, slips through the cracks of control. It is wild, messy, real, and that's what makes it irresistible. Such is life in Bangladesh. Dark, dirty, unjust, but also full of brilliant secrets that refuse to die, and if one dares to look beyond prejudice, they will discover a country where sensuality is not a pose, but a form of resistance.